All right. Let's get back there to John 5 again. John chapter 5 and verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up into Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. Well, when I first began this lesson, there are so many places that I could go to and preach lesson after lesson, and that was one of them I wanted to focus on. But as it is, you can't preach everything in one sermon, so I left a lot out this morning, so I thought I'd catch it up tonight. Having 5 porches, in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. I want you to focus on that number tonight. 38. And Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now a long time in that case. He said unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said unto him, Rise and take up thy bed and walk. And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked, and on the same day was the Sabbath. And the Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. He answered them, He that made me whole, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk. Then asked they him, What man is it that which said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, and a multitude being in that place. Afterwards Jesus found him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole, sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus, and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. But Jesus answered them, My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. There is a lot in this passage. This morning, we noticed, first of all, that at the pool of Bethesda, we see an unrealized cure. I wanted to take up tonight where we stopped this morning. At the pool of Bethesda, we see an unabashed command. Again, Jesus asked this man if he wanted to be whole. There's no indication that the man believed at all. Matter of fact, he didn't even know who it was that cured him. At first, did you notice verse 13? And he that was healed wist not who it was. I don't know who healed me. It was a man. The man didn't answer Jesus' question directly when he asked him if he wanted to be made whole, but the answer was obvious. Of course he wanted to be cured. He just simply didn't have anybody to come along and pick him up off the steps and take him down and put him in the water. And no doubt he thought that Jesus was going to put him in the water, and this seemed to be his only concern. Now, Jesus, of course, cures him. We know the rest of the story. He tells him to rise up, take his bed, and walk. But what went unstated was that Jesus made this man whole without the man even asking for it. This is not generally the fashion in which Jesus would heal people. And so there are lessons embedded into this passage. Here is the command that Jesus was unashamed to give. And the man immediately rose up and took his bed and started walking. Did you notice it said immediately? Here he has been for 38 years on these steps. And now Jesus says, take up your bed. Arise, take up your bed, and walk. Again, we learn a few lessons from this. First lesson is we ought not to be blind to other possibilities. I think this speaks solely and firmly to our prayer life. This man could only see his cure coming through the pool. You see, this man was focused on his pain. This man was focused solely on his problems. But you see, when the world looks at you and sees nothing but pain and problems, get ready, because Jesus sees potential in each and every one of us. You know, there are things that keep us down. I hear constantly what it's like to get old. You know, I'm very conscious of this. People ask me how I'm doing. I don't know if you've noticed, but lately, do you know what I say? Great. I say that because I've learned that even though I might have a few problems, generally people don't want to hear about them, right? I think we need to be aware of that. Fact of the matter is, all of us have problems. The question is, are those problems keeping us from doing what we need to do for the Lord? Are they keeping us from glorifying God? Perhaps when someone asks us how we're doing, we ought to glorify God even in the answer. If you ask someone how they're doing in Israel, do you know the response they give? How are you doing? They will say, I'm doing all right. Akol Beseda. Baruch Hashem. So what they're saying is, they're kind of passive aggressive. How are you doing? I'm doing okay. Praise be his name. Praise be his name. I think sometimes we forget that. I have enjoyed the prayers from you folks lately because you simply mentioned that we had a good night's rest and you're pleased with that. You're happy with the sunshine. You're happy with another day. All right? Job could have certainly related to that. And this man, even though he couldn't see the potential that Jesus saw in him, he thought, if only somebody would come and get me out of my terrible condition. I want you to know something. When someone else does all the work for you, it never works. Just examine our government. The government has tried to bring people up out of the gutter, and generally what they do is they throw money at it. Have you ever noticed that doesn't work at all? Compassion. Compassion is where we see Jesus doing his best work. This man could only see his cure coming to the pool. Jesus, however, saw other possibilities. How often are we so blind to our own preconception? Luke 18:27 says, the things which are impossible with men are possible with God. Do we believe that? Jesus gave the man what he needed, not what he wanted. How many times in life do we think our wants are our needs? I'm guilty of this. I'm sure if you're honest, you might say that you are too. Matthew 6:8 says, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of, right? Matter of fact, the caveat goes on to say, before you ask him. He's aware of that. You know, my parents, when they were raising me, they knew what I needed. Okay? They probably knew what I wanted too. But what I needed is what comes first. I know what these girls need. They need plenty of it. They got what they wanted today. Mama was drinking a big cup of sweet tea full of sugar and caffeine. Mama, can I please have a drink? Of course, she let him drink about the whole jug. Ironically, Naomi never went to bed. I don't know why. But you know what Laura said? She doesn't need that. Right? But bat those eyes and say please to Mama. She's got to get whatever she wants, right? I do that. I can't even stir to any compassion, I'll tell you. But the Lord knows what we need. We need to be ashamed, need not be ashamed of compassion. In 1 Peter 3:8, the Bible says, finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another. Love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous. Courteous is something that hasn't happened very often anymore. You don't see that, do you? When I first met Laura, I made it a habit of always opening her door. Well, there's a reason. Every time I'd walk over there, she'd already opened it and rolled out. And I'd tell her, no, you need to make me do that. But you see, she didn't wait. So now, all chivalry is gone. The romance is burned out. She's given that up. I say that for a reason. I think as a society, we've given these things up. Jordan Peterson says the best thing you can do for your kids is teach them manners. And when he says teach them, make them have manners. We've lost that. And then when they grow up, they have no concept of being courteous to people, of having manners. Opening the door seems like a little thing, right? Well, maybe it's not so little. My mother wouldn't get out of the truck till we opened the door for her. Right? You know what she was teaching us? You know exactly what she was doing. Here, Jesus understood something about courtesy, compassion. I have to wonder how many Jews walked by this man over the course of 38 years. Do you remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? At the pool of Bethesda, we see an unjustified criticism. The Jews immediately criticized this man being apathetic to his condition. It was the Sabbath day. There was no kind of work that was supposed to be done on that day, and carrying his bed was verboten or forbidden. Hence, they criticize. It's not lawful for you to carry your bed. After all those years of this man being paralyzed, this is the first thing they say to him. It's almost comical, isn't it? They don't rejoice that he's healed. They only criticize him for carrying his bed on the Sabbath. We need to watch out that we aren't so critical. Here this man has been healed, and the first thing they say is, what are you doing carrying that bed? They failed to have compassion on him. The truth is, they had failed this man for 38 years. Nobody had done a thing for him. No one would carry him. No one would touch him. He lived on the peripheral of society. They wanted nothing to do with him. No doubt they looked the other way for 38 years. And now they see him walking for the first time, and they say, what are you doing carrying your bed on the Sabbath? Pharisees and Sadducees are always being critical in the Bible. We need to watch that we are not pharisaical. But it happens all the time. They, like the priest and the Levite in the parable of the Good Samaritan, simply walk by. The healed man explains his action. He told him why he was carrying the bed. The guy that healed me told me to pick it up. Now, if somebody came along and healed you after 38 years, I imagine you do just about anything he said, right? And so that's what he says. Hey, it's not me, it's the guy that healed me. He told me to do this. People are always making excuses, aren't they? This man just simply obeyed. But the Jews had additional questions. They said, who told you to take up your bed and walk? And the man, of course, didn't know, but he goes and he finds Jesus later and then told the Jews who it had been. Now, I've heard a lot of preachers deliver lessons on this, and I've read a number of commentaries on this passage, and many people begin to question why this man went back and told these Jews. Have you thought about that? Because I thought a lot about it. Yep, so they go back to these leaders, tells them. I don't think he went back to get Jesus in trouble. I don't think this was it. I think once he found the name of the man that healed him, he wanted to tell everybody. That's the way we ought to be, folks. wanting to tell people about Jesus, not just people, but tell everybody. I'm reminded of reading Walt Whitman in high school, and one of the passages from his great book, he says, I will sound my barbaric yelp across the rooftops of the world. The church, do they have a barbaric yelp? Or can you barely hear it? Well, there's some lessons from this. As this morning we mentioned, we need to avoid judging others. Matthew 7, 1-5 tells us not to judge others because our own faults are going to be judged. Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. So we don't walk by when we see others suffering. We need to rejoice when good has been done to others instead of being apathetic. Are we jealous? Do we wish such things would happen to us? Or do we want to strangle them? Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with them that rejoice. What are our motives? 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourself whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Jesus Christ is in you, except ye be reprobates? What are our true motives in dealing with others? Are we honest, sincere, and pure? Finally, at the pool of Bethesda, we see an unapologetic confirmation. Without apology, Jesus confirms the Jews' accusations. Jesus says that both he and his Father work on the Sabbath. It wasn't wrong for Jesus to heal on the Sabbath. In Mark 3:4, Jesus asked the Pharisees, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days or to do evil, to save life or to kill? In Matthew 12:11-12, he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it, lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Jesus said that he was the Lord of the Sabbath in Matthew 12:8, for the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath day. You know, when he heals that woman there in Luke, it's ridiculous and almost hilarious. Do you know what their answer to Jesus was? Don't you have 6 other days that you can heal? How pitiful had their religion become that they couldn't rejoice in the healing of a brother or a sister, to where they would say, don't you have 6 other days you could do this on? Well, I want to get into something else here. And I've gone 20 minutes, so if you'll give me 5 minutes, I'd like to fetter this out a little bit. You know, I always like to go back to the Old Testament when we're dealing with the New Testament lesson. I really shouldn't keep you too long here. But this place, this pool, he's been coming to it for 38 years. Do you ever read in the Bible anywhere else of 38 years being mentioned? Anybody got any guesses? How many years did the Jews wander in the desert? 40 is what you say, but what does the Bible say? If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 2 and verse 14, and the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook of Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. Notice verse 13, what he says. Now rise up. He was encouraging these Jews in the Old Testament after wandering for 38 years aimlessly, doing the same thing over and over and over again. He says, rise up. Now, if we go back to Kadesh Barnea, we have to travel way back here to Exodus. A couple books back there. And you'll read of a story of them being in this area. This area was known for pools. Okay? What are we talking about in our passage? pools. As a matter of fact, there were a number of pools here at Kadesh Barnea where they made this great sin of being unfaithful. But another sin was mentioned in the Bible concerning this place. Do you remember what it was? They say to Moses, "Have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness because we have no drink?" What happens to that place? Moses, of course, strikes the rock and water comes out of it. But there's a great punishment that comes with that. And Moses will not see the promised land. What else happened at Kadesh Barnea, this area? What made them wander? Why they are here at the pools of Kadesh Barnea, their faith is weak. They go over and they look into the land of Israel and they say, it's impossible for us to do this thing. We cannot capture this land. Those people are giants. And God says you're going to wander the desert. And from Kadesh Barnea, from the pools where they were, until 38 years later, they needed a lesson in faith. They needed a lesson in making a decision. And they wandered aimlessly for 38 years until Moses comes to them and says, rise up. After 38 years, rise up. And here then we have in our passage, this young man. 38 years. He's been doing the same thing every day, over and over again, never getting anywhere. And what does Jesus say to him? Rise up. And that's the message for you tonight, folks. Rise up. Jesus said simply, rise up, take your mat, and walk. But you remember what he said next? He said, keep on walking. Keep on walking unless something worse happens to you. But did you notice the words he mentioned in the middle of that? Sin no more. Jesus healed this man. He was able to walk. But he wasn't completely whole until Jesus came to him and reminded him that his sin is what would kill him. Sin no more. Keep on walking. Keep on walking unless something worse happens to you. Many people complain about their situations. Here we have at the pool of Bethesda an unrealized cure, an unabashed command, an unjustified criticism, and an unapologetic confirmation to rise up. This evening, won't you come as we stand and sing?